So welcome everybody this morning. We were waiting for a couple of people, but I think we're just going to kick off. So if everyone is able to take a seat, we can get started. Okay, so look, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the country on which we're standing. So the City of Hobart recognises Tasmania's 40,000 plus years of Aboriginal heritage and culture. We acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to elders past and present. My name's Robert Stevenson. I'm the Manager, Smart and Sustainable Hobart for the City of Hobart. I'll just give some acknowledgements and thanks. So I'm not sure if the Lord Mayor is online, but I will acknowledge her presence if she's there, and any other elected members. And I'd also like to acknowledge the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Commissioner, Sarah Bolt, who's here, and very much like to thank the members of the community who've given up their time to come here this morning. Thank you very much. I have some apologies. Alderman Marty Zuko apologised that he wasn't able to make it today. Councillor Bill Harvey also was an apology, as was Councillor Dr. Zelinda Sherlock. So just, yes?
If possible, we do a roll call, because obviously there are people here who don't know who each other are, and also for those of us that are visually impaired, it's a much better way of us knowing who's in the room. And that might take a little bit of time, but it's just an inclusive way of us knowing who's here, if that's all right.
So do you want a roll call of all attendees?
Yes.
I'm very happy to do that if you'd like to. So we can just start over this side. Can I do a couple of them just quickly, because you'll see them later. So there's representatives from Neuron and Beam, who are obviously the scooter operators. And then there are some members of the City of Hobart staff who are here, but I think we'll probably not necessarily introduce everybody, but could the visitors introduce themselves, so potentially starting with you if you'd like to?
My name is Anna Pope. I'm a local disability advocate with experience. My pronouns are she.
Thank you. David?
Douglas Hawthorne. I'm part of the Access Advisory Committee here.
Okay. Sarah Bolt, who I've introduced. Thank you. And then, sorry, I'm not sure of your name.
My name is Timothy Smith.
Timothy Smith? Disability advocate. Okay. Do you want me to repeat these as I hear them?
Probably for the people on Zoom, otherwise the people on Zoom won't hear.
Yep, sure.
Is it possible to have a microphone passed around, maybe?
I don't know that it is.
I know we've got interpreters here, and it's probably quite difficult for them to hear and interpret as well.
Yeah.
If the MC can just repeat the names, I think that would be sufficient. Thanks, James.
Okay.
Michael Small. I'm a Board Director, member of Disability Voices Tasmania.
So that's Michael Small, Board Director, member of Disability Voices Tasmania. And then...
Dr. Beatty, lived experience in disability and also a member of Blind Citizens Australia.
Okay, so that's Duncan McNeady.
Yep.
From lived experiences as a blind person and here from Blind Services Tasmania. Yep.
Doug McGinn, member of Blind Citizens Tasmania.
So, I'm sorry.
Doug McGinn.
Doug McGinn. Okay, so Doug McGinn, member of
Blind Citizens Australia.
Blind Citizens Australia.
Aaron John, member of Blind Citizens Australia.
Okay, I didn't hear that again. John. Okay, John also from Blind Citizens Tasmania. So Tegan Pearce from the Department of State Growth. Craig Hoey, Department of State Growth. And then along the back row there. So, Okay, so we have three members of the Department of Community, sorry, from the Department of State Growth. Yep, no, for the Department of Community, sorry, yes. Okay, Mary McFarlane Clarence, City Council. Anthony Waddell from Kingborough Council.
Laura Drysdale, I've got a disability, my daughter's got a disability, and we really like scooters.
So Laura Drysdale, who has a disability and has a daughter with a disability who really likes scooters. So is there anyone else who would like to be introduced who hasn't been? Okay, so your surname is? Callaway, sorry. So Rosemary Callaway from the Access Advisory Committee of the City of Hobart. And we have a few more people coming in. I'll just wait for them to sit down. Thank you. Would you like to introduce yourselves? You're welcome not to, but you're welcome to if you'd like. Okay. The people who have just come in will be introducing themselves later as well. So just a little bit of quick housekeeping. Oh, sorry. Okay, I can't see them very well from here. So is anyone on Zoom who would like to introduce themselves?
James Newton, I'm up in Launceston, and so being impacted by the strong role as I'm also on the Premier's Disability Advisory Council and belong to them also have other disabilities.
I can't see the camera.
I'm happy to go. So I'm Daniel from Gillette from the Department of Transport in Victoria. We're keen to see the civil rights law in Tasmania.
So Lisa?
Yes, I'm supposed to be Stafford. I'm a retail and I'm also on board of the BBC and I'm also elected
Thank you. I think there's an Elsa. Oh, I think you're on mute, Elsa.
Okay, sorry, technical hitch. I'm Elsa. I work at Disability. I'm an orientation and mobility specialist.
Thank you, Elsa. And James Newton?
Can you hear me all right now?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm from Launceston. I am blind and have other physical disabilities, and I am also a member of the Premier's Disability Advisory Council.
Okay, thank you. Are there other people on Zoom who would like to introduce themselves?
Hi, I'm Julia. I'm the Marketing and Comms Coordinator for Hobart and Disability.
My name's Paul. I'm one of the two alternate members. I have my colleague Karen 30 years ago. We work in 15-minute shifts as well.
And we'll just give people a second for technical difficulties. Okay, so if I just quickly run through the venue, just to give you a sense of where we are. So we're in the Town Hall of the City of Hobart. You're aware of where the lifts are because you came up in them, but there are disabled toilets to the left as you leave this room and just straight ahead of you. If there is an alarm or an evacuation required, the Chief Warden will be in the room wearing the hard hat and just follow directions from them. So welcome to everybody to the e-Scooter Access Forum. Today you'll have the opportunity to hear from the operators of the trial and ask questions of them and of the City of Hobart. The event is inclusive and interactive with a hearing loop, an Auslan interpreter and staff to assist with questions. You can also contact either of the operators or call council or email council or contact us through our e-scooter page on the City of Hobart's website if you have questions that you don't feel were answered today in the forum. So look, I'll just give you a very quick rundown of why we've run this trial. So as the City of Hobart grows, we're seeing more and more congestion of our streets and more competition for parking and road space. In the community vision document of 2019, the community instructed council of what they wanted to see for the future of the City of Hobart. And one of the things that was very strongly received by the community was that we must change our transport networks. And the community said that, and I'll quote these, that the city must make the ecologically sustainable and energy efficient thing the easy thing for transport. To be bold, to investigate, trial and implement energy efficient transport and technology alternatives for the community, to seek out and respond to transport and technological opportunities that reduce emissions. So cities across the world have responded to congestion over the past century, largely by building more roads, and it's our sense that that attracts more cars. And we're looking to make choices available to people so that they can travel without a car, without necessarily having to walk if they so choose. And our data found that most car trips in Hobart are short trips. We found, for instance, that almost 20% of the cars that end up parking in North Hobart started their trip in North Hobart. And a further 20% started their trip within 1 kilometre south of North Hobart. And a further 20% started their trip within 1 kilometre north of North Hobart. So a good 50 to 60% of the trips are less than 2 kilometres, and those are people who are coming to park in North Hobart. And we've obviously seen a lot of political discussion around parking in North Hobart. In the end, there is only so much room in North Hobart, so we're very keen to find other ways for people to get around the city rather than thinking, how can we widen roads, how can we build more car parking spaces, how can we get more arterial roads into the city. We just don't see that that's going to be a sustainable choice for Hobart going into the future. We had an extensive consultation period over 18 months. That's available, I can give the details of that, but that was between the City of Hobart, various groups in Hobart, the state government, Tasmania Police and others. We also spoke extensively to other councils around Tasmania and around the world. We ended up joining with Launceston to do a joint EOI to look for the best possible micro-mobility options for the city. And these were, for the City of Hobart, these were flagged first in the community vision, then in the Connected Hobart Action Plan of 2020, so of 2019, and then in the Sustainable Hobart Action Plan in 2020. And both of those documents had extensive community consultation, and then there was further consultation around the trial itself. What we've seen in Hobart has been a massive local uptake. In the first 2 weeks, we saw 63,000 rides covering 75,000 kilometres, so that was in the first 2 weeks in December. We also saw an initial spike in antisocial behaviour, and I think we all saw that and recognised it. Increasingly, as the operators have clamped down and suspended or banned riders, behaviour and etiquette has improved, and we're hoping that it's continuing to improve. I just have lost it. There we go. There have been about 1,000 responses to our web feedback form that we have on our website, and over 70% of those have been extremely positive. Now, changes to the trial are also made every week in response to community concerns, and there's particular emphasis on rules, education and technologies to promote a safe and enjoyable mode of transport that people can use in place of cars if they choose to. And just finishing off, there have now to date been well over 250,000 rides in Hobart. We have attempted to confirm recent media reports about large numbers of serious injuries. You may have heard these, taking up valuable hospital beds. From our inquiries to local hospitals, the state government, Tasmania Police, the trial operators and their insurance companies, we can find no evidence that this is true. The hospitals have told us that they have no indication that that is true at all. There have been a small number of reported injuries, which have been covered by the insurance provided by the operators. So out of the 270,000 rides we've had so far, there have been 7 incidents that have required medical treatment in accident and emergency in the hospital. 2 of those required an overnight stay in the hospital, and none of those have been life-threatening. And I'd just add that in the same period from December to today, cars and motorcycles have taken 10 lives in Tasmania and gravely injured many more. So look, thank you again for coming today. I'll just now hand over to Glenn Aldous from Beam Mobility. He has a presentation that I'm going to open now, but for the benefit of people in the room and on the Zoom who are having trouble seeing the presentation, he's going to use that as his notes. So essentially anything that's important will be spoken, but the text of that will also be made available if needed later. Okay, so I'll hand over to Glenn and there'll be opportunities for questions towards the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. My name is Glenn Aldous. I'm the operations manager for both Hobart and Launceston. I apologise in advance to our Launceston representatives that I focused my presentation today only on Hobart, but I will attempt to mention relevant bits about our operations in Launceston as we go through. This one? Is that better? Okay, apologies for that. I can hear myself now. Okay, so on the screen is the first slide at the moment, which just contains a pretty image of happy people riding scooters, which is how we like to see it. But the rest of this presentation is pretty much verbal. There are a few images that we'll put up on the screen, but nothing will be undescribed. As Robert mentioned, the PDF will be available afterwards for anyone that wishes to go through it with an e-reader. It does contain useful information, particularly about reporting incidents to Beam and to the Council, so it might be worth grabbing a copy of that afterwards. So our first slide.
The PDF, just quickly, you mentioned information being available as a PDF. That's not an accessible format for many of the participants here today who are blind or visually impaired.
Okay, well we can provide it in other formats, and I'll consult afterwards and make sure that we provide it in an appropriate way. So to begin with a very simple description, and I'll move forward a little faster now. Beam is using the Saturn scooter. It's a traditional L-shaped scooter for riding in a standing position. The rear motor is powered by a rechargeable lithium-ion battery, and the scooter is controlled by sophisticated electronic systems. The scooters are designed for safety, reliability and durability. They will last quite a long time and not end up in the rubbish heap in a hurry. And they're built around an aviation-grade aluminium frame. 10-inch tubeless safety tyres, so they are not pump-up tyres. High-grip rear-wheel drive and a dual mechanical and electronic braking system. Thanks, Mark. The vehicles come with a range of safety features, only some of which I'll mention very briefly. Speed is regulated automatically based on the zone that the vehicle is in, and I'll explain a little more about zones as we go on. They have front, tail and brake lights, and a variant of our model also contains indicators. So they don't all have indicators, but approximately half our fleet, I believe, currently has indicators. Dual electronic and mechanical brakings, as I mentioned before, ensure that the scooter can be stopped safely and the speed can be controlled by the rider also. Beam has introduced in Hobart and Launceston a beep, an audible beep, every 5 seconds, which warns pedestrians of an approaching scooter. It's not especially loud, but you can generally hear it with normal sort of levels of hearing at a good 5 to 10 metres away. And so when I've been riding them on the streets, I have noticed that people have heard the beep before I've rung my bell. We have helmets on every scooter, of course, and we also have a helmet use detection system. If we detect riders who have not utilised the helmet provided, they get an email to remind them of the requirement to wear a helmet. And we are currently demonstrating around Australia, and have done so in Hobart and Launceston for our councillors, a new technology based on artificial intelligence called Pedestrian Shield. Pedestrian Shield enables the vehicle to determine the terrain that it is currently riding on, and it can therefore more accurately slow down for footpaths and meet the speed requirements for footpaths, and allow the scooter to go faster as it is allowed to under the laws on a road. This has not been rolled out yet, but we are expecting that to happen when we have completed all of our testing. So at the moment we have been driving one of these scooters around both Hobart and Launceston and teaching it what the footpaths look like. And then it transmits all of that information to the rest of the fleet when it's equipped with this technology. If only we could do that with our children, it would be wonderful. Okay. And of course, just briefly going to mention, as Robert did, that all our riders are protected by insurance for both personal injury, loss of damage and damage to third-party property. And finally, of course, every scooter has a bell. And if I'd been standing next to it, I wouldn't be walking across here. A manual bell. It's quite a distinctive sound, and gets heard a lot on our streets now. Next slide. Which one am I using? Sorry. I turned this thing the wrong way around. I have, right. Okay. So Beam's technology. We use GPS positioning technology, the Bluetooth technology and the mobile phone network to communicate with scooters and to determine their precise location. We have all of that recorded in our system so we can track the movement of scooters. The Beam scooters are controlled by the user using an app on the smartphone. Everyone can download this app, whether you are a rider or a non-rider, and the app's map shows where scooters are located, and it also enables easy reporting of any problems directly to Beam's customer service. So even if you aren't a scooter user, it might be a good idea to consider downloading the Beam app. Our safety ambassadors, who are out there on the streets, utilise special features of the app to report breaches of the rules by riders and locate problem scooters which need to be collected or moved. The app is simply called Beam and can be downloaded from the Apple and Google Play stores onto your phone. Beam will soon also offer some new designs of vehicles which are more accessible for riders who cannot stand for long. I'm sorry, it's Beam, B-E-A-M.
Thank you.
So on the screen we have a picture of a couple of different types of scooter, which I'll describe in a moment. These are not currently on the streets, but we are hoping to introduce them later this year. And they are more accessible scooters for riders who find it difficult to stand for long distances. So one of these scooters is fitted with a seat. It's still an L-shaped scooter, but it has a seat and lower handlebars for riding in that position. And we have another scooter coming in which has two wheels at the front and one at the back, providing a sort of tripod type arrangement which gives more stability and might be suitable for people that don't feel comfortable on only two wheels. I just wanted to touch briefly on how the operating area and the zones work. So in Hobart, we operate from the edge of the city of Hobart down towards Taroona at Grange Park, in Lower Sandy Bay through to Creek Road, Newtown in the north. To the west, we also operate in Lena Valley and West Hobart, to the south, Denern and South Hobart. In Launceston, the footprint is a little bit smaller, although we are seeking to expand that soon. And we operate from, let me get it right, Mayfield, we're not in Rochely yet, through down to South Hobart and I think to the edge of, forgotten the suburb, someone from Launceston can help me, starts with a K. Kings Meadows, that's right. Thank you very much. Right, so Beam requires all riders to park their scooters so they do not obstruct footpaths or become a nuisance to other footpath users. Good parking is encouraged through rewards for parking in designated areas, and riders submit a photo of their parked scooter at the end of each trip, which is stored on our database and is sometimes very useful for going back and investigating incidents. The City of Hobart and the City of Launceston and Beam work together to ensure the safety of all footpath users, and the zone system helps us with this. There are three types of zone which riders can see on the map, which is displayed in their Beam app. There are no parking zones. This is where vehicles may be ridden, but they may not be parked. They're used to prevent parking on narrow footpaths or for other hazardous areas. And we are constantly adjusting these. I've recently put some no parking extensions in Battery Point, where we have some very narrow streets, and we are very interested in community feedback. We'll assess and decide, working in conjunction with the council. So in a no parking zone, the scooters know that they're there from the GPS positioning, and they will not allow the rider to park their scooter in these zones. And users get a prompt on their app to move out of the zone before they're permitted to park. Secondly, we have no riding zones. These are places that scooters simply cannot be ridden. If a scooter enters a no riding zone, it slows to a stop and locks. Riders get a prompt using the app that they need to unlock their scooter and leave the zone. If they don't do that and they remain in the no riding zone, the scooter locks again. We do tend to find that a few riders simply abandon them in there, but at least they are not a risk, and our people go in and pull them out of the no riding zones. Thirdly, there is a penalty parking zone, and these are zones that are more for internal use. They're zones where it is difficult to retrieve vehicles from, but sometimes people might wish to park there. It costs us more in terms of time to retrieve them, and so due to the difficulty of collecting those scooters, riders pay a fee for parking in these zones. The main ones to consider are the no parking zones and no riding zones. Now, I'll just briefly talk about the Tasmanian rules for scooter use. You probably know them already, and there's a number of publicity campaigns that have grown out already, and a new one that's in preparation. The regulations, state government, require riders to ride with due care and attention. It is illegal not to do that. They have to be at least 16 years of age, must wear a helmet whilst riding, not allowed to share a scooter with another rider, and there are speed limits. They must be observed 15 kilometres per hour on footpaths, 25 kilometres per hour on roads, and scooters are allowed only on roads that do not have central line markings, which essentially means that they must use the footpaths where there are central lines on roads. And of course, just with a car, they're not permitted to be under the influence of alcohol or other intoxicating substances. Beam and our friends at Neuron are very, very keen on educating good riders. Beam's Safety Academy program offers riders training in safe scooter use. From next Saturday, everyone is welcome to ride a scooter with the assistance of our safety ambassadors at Princess Wharf near Salamanca Markets, where we'll be from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And that will continue, I believe, for the next 7 Saturdays in April and May. Beam also seeks to educate new users about the rules and safety through targeted engagement with engagement activities with college and university students as examples. And in addition, Beam offers free one-to-one sessions with community members who have special needs. A safety ambassador will bring a scooter to these booked sessions and spend up to half an hour with each person to develop skills and build their confidence in riding a scooter. If you'd like to do that, please contact Hobart Operations to arrange a suitable time and place. And the information for contacting us a little bit further on. Now, getting towards the end, I did want to talk about how we enforce the rules. And I apologise that this slide does have slightly smaller type on it, so you might want to listen rather than try and read if it's a bit too small. Engagement and reporting are our first level of defence when it comes to enforcing. Our safety ambassadors are active on the streets night and day, both on foot and in vans. If they see a rider doing the wrong thing, they attempt to engage with that rider about safety. If the rider remains non-compliant, the vehicle is reported using the Marshal's app, and we have an automated system that sends a warning email to that rider about the correct behaviour, and we record a strike against that person's account. Moving on to suspensions and bans. If a rider records 3 strikes for breaches such as these, not wearing helmets, bad parking, etc., they are automatically suspended. Riders that are reported to us as being underage are immediately suspended and are required to provide evidence of age before we will reinstate their account. Riders committing serious offences, such as damaging other people's property, Beam's scooters, are banned and in some cases incur charges under Beam's rider agreement. And the third level, of course, is our collaboration with Tasmania Police. We work with the police to identify riders that have committed serious offences, and in these cases, complaints to the police that go directly to police are referred to Beam for verification from our data, and that data then informs police decisions about whether to charge an individual with an offence. So, how do you make a report to Beam if you come across something that is a problem? So, I'll start and work backwards in this case. Serious offences, antisocial behaviour, and accidents involving serious injury should be reported directly to the police. Police will then liaise with Beam, assuming that it's a Beam scooter that's been involved, and obtain the details of the vehicle and the rider involved. Nuisance behaviour and bad parking, which is more common of course, this can be reported directly to Beam, and there are 3 ways that you can do that. You can telephone the helpline, and the number is on the screen and is in the document, but I'll read it out for anyone who wishes to make a note. The number is 0373 02 8265, and that applies in both Hobart and Launceston. We have an email address, which is an easy one to remember. It is support@ridebeam, is one word, ridebeam.com. And you can use the Beam app, if you have it on your phone, to send a direct message through to customer support. When doing that on any of those three methods, it's best to provide as much information as you have available to you. So date, time and location are really important. And if you know the scooter number, and I'll talk a little more about scooter numbers in the last slide, it's really helpful to have that. How you can expect Beam to respond? Well, for bad parking and obstructions, a safety ambassador will be sent by Hobart Operations to move or collect the scooter as soon as possible. Beam attempts to respond to these requests in as short a time as possible, and we have a very good response time up to date, and I hope we're going to be able to maintain and improve that. For other issues, such as riders breaking the rules, the details will be entered into the 3-strike system that I talked about before, and the rider will be advised and suspended if they are a repeat offender. So, where to find a scooter number? So, Beam scooters are, of course, the purple scooters, and I'm just going to move away from the microphone, but I'll try to speak loudly, just so for the purpose of the people in the audience here, though I apologise, it probably won't be visible to the people on Zoom, but I will describe where they are. So, when reporting a nuisance or more serious incident, the scooter number really helps us act quickly and identify the location and the rider. Beam scooter numbers are displayed in large white numerals on a black background on the front of the vehicle, both sides, and on the rear mudguard. I'm just going to describe that. I'm just going to point those out now. A number here. You have numbers on the sides, both sides there, and also on the rear mudguard. And finally, on the screen is displayed an image of a QR code with words in large yellow type, "In the way?" ? Scan. And the QR code is circled by a yellow band. These words and the yellow box will be raised tactile, and they'll be affixed to the scooters over the next couple of months. The beauty of the QR code here, and we're still testing this system, but we hope to have it out very soon, is that you don't even need the app. If you have a smartphone, you'll be able to scan that QR code, and it will automatically send the location and the number of the scooter directly to Beam. I think this is a really good way, and I think many people will actually choose to use this way to report scooters that are badly parked, because it will simply be so much easier than having to make telephone calls or send emails. So we're hoping that that will speed up response times as well and make it easier for everyone. So I'm looking forward to receiving our batch of those scooters in the next shipment.
So further question about that, where are you going to place them? There's a lot of dead white people here, we're probably not going to feel every single surface of the scooter.
Yes, and I wish I could confirm that. I did actually ask. I don't know exactly where on the scooters yet they are intending on placing them.
James here. As well, the head of Technology Division Australia, David Woodbridge, he is even clear that QR code orientation is extremely difficult for our community, and there are many in our community that can't afford, who may be multiple disabilities, cannot use smartphones.
Yes, and I acknowledge that's a very good point. This is a fourth way, adding to the arsenal, as it were, of ways that scooters can be reported. And so, in addition to email and telephone, the other two, yes, the app and the QR code do require the use of a smartphone. We certainly won't be withdrawing email or telephone notifications.
And I'd like to just point out, on Saturday this past, I had to do a pharmacy run, So
Okay.
it's not just typically one that you have a collision with. If you're doing walking within a central business district to your suburb, it can often be multiple. And am I meant to be calling police about every single one? Who has that sort of time? Is that reasonable? Is that a reasonable item to be placed purely on the person with disability or the pedestrian?
Well, I can't speak from the council's perspective, but from Beam's perspective, we are happy to receive reports with, excuse me, with as much information as can be provided. So if you're unable to determine whether it is a Neuron or a Beam scooter, and of course in some cases they may be privately owned scooters and not either of us causing trouble, but if they are, we're happy to receive the reports. We will check our maps if we have the location, and we'll be able to find whether it is our scooter or not. I have established a communication channel between Beam and Neuron, and I send text messages through to my counterpart. If we find that it isn't a Beam, Neuron may check. So I would suggest that provide as much information as possible, and perhaps the information is that it was a group of 3 scooters. That's fine, that will help us determine. We can spot on the map, 3 scooters in that area. They must be the ones that are badly parked or obstructing the footpath.
In regards to making a complaint on the website, is the website accessible? Has that been checked through the visually impaired and blind community?
I cannot answer that question. I don't know whether it has been certified as such, but I will make a note to go back and check that it has. I have used the website a fair bit, and I've designed websites that are compliant in the past. It does look quite good. Thank you very much. So I will make a note to ensure that we have had our website checked for that. So are there any other questions of Beam in particular?
Just a point, a few slides back you had the term special needs. That's actually quite an outdated term. So
I'm getting old, I'm sorry.
You may want to look at that into the future.
Okay, I think we have actually even got that on our website, so thank you for that heads up, and we will try and update our terminology. Yeah.
Sorry, this is Paul. Could you please repeat that question for all of us in the Zoom room, so we can hear the question?
Oh, I'm sorry, it was just a question. Shall I repeat? Yes. Okay, I'm sorry, yes, I should have repeated the question. The question was that I had used the term special needs, and it was an outdated term these days, earlier in the slides, and I've committed to ensure that we update our terminology. Yes. Yes, please. Okay, the question is the blood alcohol 0.05 as it is for driving, or is it 0? My interpretation, and I'd be interested in yours on this, is that the state legislation implies 0, says you must not drive under the influence, and does not, I believe, specify 0.05. So I think we're 0.
Look, as far as sorry, Robert Stevenson again from City of Hobart. As far as I'm aware, there is not a specified amount, and obviously the age limit is 16, so obviously for a 16 or 17-year-old it's going to be 0, and my understanding is that beyond that it would be 0 as well, but I would have to take advice from the Department of State Growth eventually on that. Yeah, so the question was, do the police randomly breath test people who they think might be under the influence riding a scooter? So the answer is they are perfectly at liberty to, but as far as I'm aware, unless there's been an accident or something like that, they haven't been doing random breath testing of scooter riders to date. Yeah. Okay, look.
With regard to the marshals being aware when a scooter falls down, on Saturday just gone, I probably knocked over 3 on my journey out of the 6 that I collided with. It was too difficult to get all of them up. Now while I returned, one had been stood back up but was still obstructing a footpath, so if that was a marshal that had moved that again, I'm noticing when they are getting stood back up that they're still problematic in how they're being placed. So I think there's good reason for them to maybe marshals to have undertaken some training with an orientation mobility officer for a service like disability.
I agree with James. I live in the central of the city, and I am constantly going down footpaths where in the middle of a footpath there is one left, and having to navigate around.
Yeah, so the comment there was
I
that...
think the marshals are quite across how to make something out of the path of a pedestrian that either can't see or has a mobility device.
Okay, and the comment from the floor here was the same, that there are often scooters placed across footpaths that are difficult to get around. So I think that's a message back to the operators. As far as I'm aware, for both operators, if a scooter has fallen over, they are aware of that through the sensing of the scooter and would be relatively quick to go and pick that up again. On average, I think we've seen something like, for one of the operators, I can't speak for the other one, something like less than 1 hour being the average time to respond to requests. And obviously some will be longer than an hour and some will be shorter, but that's been the average to date to respond to.
Yes, but then when it was stood up, it's obviously been put back up by a marshal, I would say, in a bad place again. So,
yeah. And
I think there needs to be more training for the marshals with people that are qualified to guide them on how to ensure they're not obstructive to pedestrians with disability.
Yeah, and look, I think there's a good chance that people who weren't marshals have also picked them up as well, because the marshals, in my understanding, have got a fairly good idea of where to put them to keep them out of the way, specifically because they don't want to be going back to do it again when someone complains about where it's been left.
At the start of the opening, I think, was your name Robert? I couldn't quite catch at the start.
Yes, that's correct, Robert Stevenson.
So you spoke about the quadrupling consultation by council. I'm keen to know what groups, like did it include disability groups at all? Because I know that State Road did not even reach out to the Disability Ministers Advisory Council and Premier's Disability Advisory Council before the amendment got put to the Legislative Council last November. So when you said there was one consultation, who did that include?
So within the City of Hobart, we have our own committee called the Access Advisory Committee, and that was the group to which I presented, I think 3 times during the 12 months leading up to the trial, and took advice and questions and concerns from that group, and that was the... This is an external advisory committee, so it includes elected members and members of various groups, including Disability Voices. A number of people in this room are on that committee as well. So it's a community group that is run by council. It meets quarterly to discuss access issues around the City of Hobart, and it's generally the way that the City of Hobart uses to engage with those groups. And we have another committee, for instance, called the Active Transport Committee, which also speaks to those kinds of groups like motorist groups, bicycle groups, and that group, that committee was engaged with as well.
In this grand scheme of things, though, they're still a relatively small group, and largely, Tasmania has the largest disability community in the whole of Australia. And a lot of us weren't notified that this was happening until it was happened already. So wider consultation like this should have been implemented beforehand, because it all took us aback because we didn't know it was happening.
Yeah, no, so the point there was that there's a much broader disability community in Tasmania than is represented on that committee, and in fact in Tasmania it's the largest percentage of the population, is that of any state in Australia, and that the council should have and could have engaged more broadly with people beyond that group.
Yeah, I think if you're having government come with a trial to write out anything, now that you're aware they have 2 disability advisory councils within government that departments can consult with, I'd be asking as councils, have they consulted with them first? Because in this case that didn't occur. I also noticed you mentioned not with your hospital reports. Now I know all of them, Councillor Jeff Briscoe reported back in late January that GPs had come to him about incidents. So I'd suggest that a lot of people that are injured are accessing their GPs as opposed to getting stuck waiting in emergency departments for long periods. And look, if the state reports have been coming through in Queensland when the child started there in November 2018, reports started coming in from January 2019, and the Jameson Trauma Institute in Australia has significant numbers of reports about injuries to pedestrians by scooters, either by riders using them or by ones that are left poorly placed. So I think the ability to, I think that a lot of the reports are getting underrepresented because of a lot of people's inability to report them through the methods that are currently available. And as well, and this is no particular criticism of being on here on, but the complaint process is primarily left up to them to manage. And they've got a conflict of interest because obviously they have a business to run. So if there is a risk there as well, I think.
Yeah, okay, so I think.
Relying on them solely for your bigger numbers of incidents and the severity.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, it's Beam and Neuron who are operating the insurance schemes, or what their insurers are, and any injury of any severity we would expect would result in a claim on those insurers, or at least an investigation by the operators. We don't have information from. We've got information that there are all of these people in hospitals taking up hospital beds. We haven't been able to verify that, and nor have the hospitals or the police or the operators or their insurance companies or council. So, you know, if there are people being injured and not reporting it, it's not really something that we can know about, but people are very welcome to report those to council, and our website makes it very clear that reporting is available. So Duncan?
That's great point of order, but there's multiple people that are going to be making presentations, from my understanding, today. And I was just wondering, if we actually move to have questions directed to all participating presenters at the end?
Yep.
Otherwise, I know I have to leave at 12:30, I'll get back on my work. A lot of people here too. Can we just stop all questions from the floor now entirely and have them? Because it's just going to keep on going to and growing.
Yep, very happy to do that. I came up here to try to move on to Neuron's presentation. So if I get that started, and then I'll have Nick Chang from Neuron, who will be speaking to you in just a second.
Hey everyone, my name is Nick Chang, and I am the current regional manager for Neuron Mobility, looking after Tasmania, which includes both Hobart and Launceston. Sitting right here, on the first slide we have just a picture of Sorry, we're on the second slide now.
Sorry, mate.
All good. On the second slide here, we have 6 pictures of our Hobart leadership team. So starting from the top left, we have Richard Hanna, who is the head of ANZ, myself, who is the current regional manager. We have Lachlan McLean, who is operating right here, and he will be the new regional manager taking over the Tasmanian region starting from April 1st. We have Daniel Hochstetter, who is our city operations manager, who is in an apology today. Robert Taylor, our warehouse supervisor, and Alex Stewart, our operations supervisor. So all up in Hobart, we are supported by a team of 40-ish ground operators and warehouse mechanics who operate on a 24/7 basis in the city to make sure that to resolve all issues that we have going on in the city, both on the streets of Hobart and in the warehouse, also in the Neuron warehouse. Next slide, please. Great. So I just want to go through some basic trial stats from Neuron so far. So overall, we've seen a very incredible launch here in Hobart, being widely accepted and used by the community here. So in terms of users, we've had over 40,000 users sign up to our app. We've had over 100,000 trips. We have a rating that we ask our users to give at the end of every rating, and that on average has been 4.38, and that's a rating out of 5. We also operate a type of pass scheme using our app, which is essentially a way to we have a 1-day, a 3-day, a weekly, and a monthly pass, which does significantly reduce the amount of fees that you have to pay to use our scooters. So out of these passes, we have sold more than 2,250 passes to members of the community. We also have an internal bad riding reporting form that we ask all members of our team, especially our ground patrollers and our safety ambassadors, to report through. And using these reports, this internal reporting form, we have received more than 400 plus bad riding reports, again, internally. And on average, another thing that we calculate or we track is the average what we call operational touches per scooter per day. So this number here in Hobart for our team is 1.87 so far from launch till date, which means that on average, on any day, every scooter will be touched by one of our staff members 1.87 times. Yeah. Next slide, thank you. Great. Just want to go through quickly our incident analysis. So currently 99.9999% of trips occur incident-free in Hobart. Now the national average for scooter incidents is 2 serious incidents every 100 kilometers ridden. So we are well below that national average here in Hobart.
100,000.
Yeah, 2 incidents every 100,000 kilometers ridden. Yep. And yeah, we have a thorough incident reporting process in effect. We report all incidents to council, and our customer support teams who work 24/7 do follow up and investigate every single incident that is reported to us. Lastly, our data, we do track the scooters themselves and all the data that we can via the scooters. And our data can allow insights into access and mobility issues faced by wheelchair users, vision impaired, and other footpath users, as well as infrastructure usage. I will touch a little bit upon this a little further down the slides. Great. So I want to talk about the insurance that we offer at Neuron. So we have 3. We have 3 different types of insurance. So we have a public liability insurance, a personal accident insurance, and also a third-party liability insurance. The one I want to talk about today is our third-party liability insurance. So we were the first operator to be able to provide this level and this type of insurance in Australia. And essentially what this does is it covers third parties that are involved in a scooter accident with one of the Neuron scooters. Yeah. We, along with our ground patrollers and our warehouse mechanics, we also have a team of dedicated, what we call safety ambassadors. So we have these safety ambassadors stationed throughout the week at key and highly trafficked areas within Hobart. Places such as Salamanca, Battery Point, where their entire focus of their job is to look out and watch out for bad, or for people who are riding against or not within the rules, and then to again report them through our internal bad riding report. We also, just like Beam have mentioned earlier, we do operate what we call Neuron Scoot Safe events. So these events are physical events that we set up, again, at different areas throughout the city. I think the one in the picture here is the one at Salamanca. So there's two pictures, one near the waterfront and the other one also near the waterfront. We have also run these events before at University of Tasmania. And the point of them is to, number one, help the public understand what the road riding rules are, and also to teach them how to safely and correctly ride and park our scooters. We also are running an active safe riding social media campaign. So on the slide itself, we have 3 pictures. They are actually links, which I'm happy to provide an accessible format after this meeting. And these are links to videos that we are on active social media campaigns. Starting from the top left, there is a video about how to park correctly. Then to the right, that you need to be wearing a helmet for every one of your rides. Then on the bottom, a video that educates people on to not drink and ride. Yep. So this is some third-party outreach that we've done. So using some of that data that we do get from our scooters, we have reached out or started reaching out to a few organizations, both disability and accessibility organizations and not. And I think through our outreach, what we want to be doing is hear your concerns and then see if we can work through and support any of them. Yeah. So again, starting from the top left, there's Hobart City Mission, going down to Disability Voices Tasmania, Tasmanian Small Business Council, then to the right, Hobart Botanic Club, Guide Dogs Australia, University of Tasmania, and Blind Citizens Australia. So now on this slide, I just want to go through some of the safe riding framework / technologies that we have at Neuron. So first off, we do have geofencing technology. I won't go through this as Beam have already done so, but we have the exact same geofencing technology as Beam does, which is using the no-ride zones, the slow speed zones, and the no-park zones. We have a helmet lock, so which allows a helmet to be locked and to be used by every rider. We have the world's first voice guidance system on our scooters. So our scooters in the orange are the only ones that will talk to you and help you understand what's happening and what's going on during your ride. It also does talk about some road riding rules while you start and end the trip. We do also have a fall detection technology. So number one, we do detect when a scooter falls over or is toppled. We do see that in our back-end operator app. And as soon as the scooter does detect as soon as the scooter detects that it is toppled, on the app itself for the rider, there will be an option for them to call emergency assistance, which is 000. Now, in development, we do have pavement riding detection, We also have dangerous driving detection, which is when a rider would be swerving dangerously or going very suddenly fast and slow. We also have a user scoring system that's in development. RTK positioning, which is technical jargon. I'm actually not sure what it stands for, but essentially it's a way for our GPS technology to be much more accurate beyond what it is currently capable of. And we also have in development a general enforcement app, which will allow for easier and more accessible enforcement for members of the public. Now, continued, we do also incentivize our riders and our users to be riding safely. So we do incentivize parking at parking stations with a 50-cent trip discount. So if you do end your trip and park at one of our stations, you do get 50 cents off. We also do give you another 50 cents if you take a selfie with your helmet at the end of your trip. Yeah, so through both, I guess, an incentivization and decentivization programs, we do try to encourage, safe riding in general. We also, as I said, in terms of our penalization, we do have user education emails, user suspensions, and user bans. Our model in terms of how this works is, again, very similar to Beam's, where any member of the public can report them. We do also have a phone number, an email. You can also report it via our website. And on our scooters there, each one of them does have the email and the phone number to report something through. Now, we are also putting in a scan to report QR code very similar to Beam. And on top of that, we are also looking to put on Braille stickers that has the same information on the side of SEM of the Neuron scooters. Yeah, and then lastly, some Hobart specific safety initiatives. In Hobart, for both Friday and Saturday nights, we do send out an educational pop-up that shows up. Mostly, we do change the messaging from time to time, but the standard is to not drink and drive. We do also do this specifically for when events happen. We do also customize the copy that we put in this. We have a no parking zone in large parts of the Salamanca and Bayfront areas. They are also timed geofences, so mostly from Thursday to Saturday from 11 to 5 p.m., which again is to reduce the potential of antisocial / drunken riding. We have a CBD slow speed zone that is on 24/7, and we do have specific parts of Battery Point that are no parking zone and actually slow speed zones, which we have engaged the Battery Point committee to put in to implement. Yeah. And yes, that is the last slide. So pass it over back to Robert.
Thank you very much, Nick. Look, I am going to invite Jen Nichols to come up and speak first, as that was the arrangement that she would launch the Q&A session. So Jen, are you right to come up?
That's good. And we've got cardio.
Just, you sit there. Drop down. Drop. Drop.
All right.
Oh, I told you it hasn't Bluetooth. Excuse me, we're just having a few issues again. It's worked the whole morning. It's okay. Embarrassing.
Yep. You may. Yeah, that's right.
Good. Okay.
Hallelujah. We're all good. Got it. Bring back the old wireless cord a bit. Yeah, right there. Okay. Yeah. My apologies, actually. I have a new computer, but the headphone jack decided yesterday to give me grief, and so I can't use the trusty old wire, so I had to try and Bluetooth, which was working fine yesterday, but not this morning. So excuse me if I have a few little hiccups along the way, because I had this practice, but now it's all different. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the vendors for your presentations today. I'm sure you have given people a lot to think about. I would like to begin by saying that while I am an executive member of Blind Citizens Australia, Tasmania branch, I am here to represent myself today. I am keen to see e-scooters become part of life here in Tasmania. I am not here to try and put forward new policies or suggest changes to legislation. However, I would like to highlight some of the issues I have been confronted with and make some suggestions which I believe will allow the e-scooter trial to be successful. Oh, I need to breathe, sorry. I'm a little bit nervous. With the knowledge that there has been a full consultation with all the stakeholders. Following 13 years of blindness, I have an excellent sense of orientation of my environment and can walk safely with my dog guide. The other day, I was walking on the left-hand side of the footpath on Elizabeth Street towards the Hill Street grocer with Nellie, my seeing eye dog. Firstly, I was confronted by a skateboarder who decided to test out his personal best time down the middle of the footpath, leaving me a little shaken. I gathered my wits to cross Rupert Street and approach the scary Augusta Road intersection near the Hill Street grocer, Newtown. I didn't write that bit, sorry. The traffic was banking up at the lights on my right, and now I was unable to hear or see anything as a metro bus was idling beside me. Cars were flying through the flashing amber lights onto Augusta Road, and I was not sure whether they were going to turn left into the grocer or continue on. Imagine my surprise and shock as Nellie stopped, just when I was expecting her to turn left into the safety of the car park. I didn't have time to stand and work out why, as a car beeped, causing us both to instinctively jump to the left, right into the middle of a tangle of what I later learned was 8 e-scooters, all parked across the corner of the only safe pedestrian access to the grocer. I was on the ground with Nellie on top of me. These were both purple and orange. This was just one of my own personal experiences, and believe me, I have plenty of others. They mainly involve speed, inappropriate parking, lack of audible noise, and/or poor behaviour. I am very aware of the way that we can call to complain to the vendors, but should I wish to do this, I have two options. I either stand and wait for someone to come along and tell me what colour the scooter is. I don't know. Is it orange or is it purple? Who do I call? Or I use a special program called IRA, where a US citizen can view and record what I see through the back of my phone camera. This is very handy, but comes at a financial cost to me. Then I raise the question, what if the scooter is privately owned? Who is enforcing these rules? Who do I call then? When these scooters are immobilised, they become very heavy. But I am not embarrassed to say that I have become somewhat of an expert at lifting them and moving them out of our way. My only regret is that the scooter, which spoke back to me the other day, threatening to call 000 if I was to damage the vehicle, did not do as it promised. I would have been most willing to wait for the police to arrive that day, as the bruise on my shin lasted almost 3 weeks when I landed on that scooter, which was lying in the middle of the path. Now I know it's the yellow ones. While I think that the e-scooters are a wonderful idea for Hobart and Launceston, I feel it is extremely important that there is a broader roundtable discussion with state and local government to ensure that an effective monitoring and recording of incidents and the enforcement of regulations and user rules. Sorry, that was a full stop. This is especially so when you consider that not only are we now dealing with the two vendors of this trial, but more and more privately owned PMDs are appearing around our cities and towns. The current rules allow e-scooters to ride on footpaths at a maximum of 15 kilometres per hour. Yet under the same rules, a power wheelchair that is required for everyday mobility is limited to only 10 kilometres per hour. I note that it has been suggested by members of the council, I note that it has been suggested that scooters should be restricted to riding on the outside of the footpath, thus allowing room for people to safely exit shops. However, is this practical? Consider Collins Street between the mall and Murray Street on the JB Hi-Fi side as an example, and I apologise to the Launceston people listening. I just used the Hobart example. Firstly, you have people gathering at the traffic lights to cross Collins Street near the mall. Just before that seated area where others congregate to smoke and chat. The taxi rank is next, with the central bar and cafe tables often in the middle of the footpath. A dog guide is trained to walk up the left-hand side, so we already have to avoid sandwich boards, car doors which are often open, and trucks in loading zones which often don't bother to tether their doors back according to WH work practices. At the corner of Murray Street, there is more alfresco dining, people gathering at the lights on Collins Murray, and a very narrow area to get through with those two large concrete pillars. Not forgetting, of course, the telecommunications boxes, and the list just goes on. An audible noise would definitely help to ensure our safety. Could they make a continuous 5-second intermittent beeping noise, which has been mentioned today, which is a lot of extra auditory stimulation for someone who has no sight or very low vision? Everybody thinks that a dog does the work, but we actually are constantly listening for everything. Or a horn which could sound just behind, horn or bell as we've seen today, which could sound just behind a pedestrian. Good ideas, but how would someone who has ASD, for example, and who is not used to unusual sounds, for example, cope with this sudden noise? With this in mind, I feel it is extremely important to highlight that every solution which has been recommended as the trial has progressed or progresses has its own pros and cons, not just for someone without eyesight, but the many other groups in the community whose needs must be considered. I feel there would be great value in bringing together all the stakeholders in a roundtable discussion, and envisage these groups would include, but would not be limited to, representatives from Disability Voices Tasmania, Council of the Ageing, Blind Citizens Australia, Visibility, Paraquad, Neuron, Beam, Tasmania Police, and most importantly, local and state government representatives. From the relevant city councils and state growth needs to oversee this. I can see a need for a problem-solving or consultation group that can constantly monitor the trial and ensure one solution for one group does not create problems for other groups. We have all heard stories in the media of accidents, inappropriate parking, people riding the scooters under the influence of alcohol, and that list goes on. There are also many more positive stories as well. We just need to get this balance right for everyone. It can work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jen. That was a wonderful presentation. Look, there are operators, members of the City of Hobart and other people here. The time is 27 past 12. I'm very happy to stay and answer questions if they come up. There are also the other avenues for questions in the future, and we can easily run another session if need be. There's a question up the back.
My question probably is directed towards council and state government staff. So we have a Hobart transport strategy to identify the great pathways. And as Jen said, our footpath space is really congested, particularly with so much demand on it.
Sorry, this is going to be a long question. Could you go to the microphone so that people can hear?
As Jen mentioned in her presentation, the footpaths are really congested in Hobart, particularly in the CBD area, because they're trying to accommodate outdoor dining, sandwich boards, rubbish bins, seats. And I work part-time for an organisation called Cycling South, and I'm on the Tasmanian Bicycle Council. One of the things that we've been pushing for is separated cycleways, which would create space off the footpath in the road reserve for bicycles and also other mobility devices such as scooters. And that's sort of something that I think has probably got to be looked at as the next step, because this technology is here. We're going to see more of it, and we're going to see more of this micro-mobility happening. And we can't expect the footpath to be the space where it's happening. And I think that probably the biggest challenge is going to be for government is the removal of on-street car parking in places, because that's the only road space that we have that we can actually use. I don't think we can pull out traffic lanes, particularly where you've got...
Sure, if you could move a bit closer to the microphone, if your voice is dropping in and out.
Sorry. So I guess that's my question, is what sort of progress is happening at local council level and state government level about actually starting to look at changing the form of our roads so that we can actually accommodate micromobility that's not being squeezed onto footpaths.
Sorry, if I could just interrupt. I want to be on the number 12, but actually I'm not on the side. I'm really sorry.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really good one, and it's exactly right that the space that we would like to use potentially for active transport and micromobility is currently used for parking. In fact, almost every metre of curb space in the city of Hobart is used for car parking, for private car vehicles at the moment. There's such a large number of things that have to happen to change that, and one of them is to encourage people to use methods other than a car to get into the city, because while the demand is there for parking, it is politically extremely difficult, as people who read the newspaper will know, to make a change that affects people's ability to park on the street. And it's something that we're hoping that the micromobility trial is one of those methods where we'll be able to encourage people to use these vehicles instead of cars. A lot of the feedback is that people are doing that, and we need to very, slowly, unfortunately, start to move that balance away from private cars and seeing the curb space as only available for private cars, because pedestrians, micromobility, cyclists and all other kinds of road users are all trying to be crammed onto that very precious footpath space. So I agree completely. The policy settings to change that are extraordinarily difficult to push through. There are things happening. We're putting bicycle lanes in. There's a state government grant that's helping us do that in the city of Hobart. That's to try to connect up some of those Argyle-Campbell Street lanes that are currently, bike lanes exist, but then they end, so there's no continuous path into the city. We're very keen to complete that one from North Hobart into the CBD and then provide bicycle parking in Argyle Street car park, for instance. But this is something that needs to be much broader. Sorry, there first.
Do any of the rules for any changes with parking or scooters or like where they're allowed to go, so that if it's maybe in Hobart City Council, does any of that reach into the other councils like Paris and Kinborough?
So the question was whether the rules are specific to Hobart City Council or whether they're across Tasmania. So the legislation that allows micromobility, PMDs and scooters to ride on the roads was introduced, and on footpaths, was introduced into Tasmania on the 1st of December, and it's identical across all towns and cities throughout Tasmania. We have specific areas that we can designate no scooter zones within Hobart, but the road rules apply equally everywhere. E-scooters have actually been allowed on the footpaths in Tasmania since 2008, and the change that happened in 2021 in December was to allow them to go on the road or the footpath and to set those speed limits where it used to be a power limit. Oh, okay, sorry, yes, question from online?
More of an observation, Rob. It was more an observation, like when you were talking before, and I think it was Alison, I'm not sure, it was really hard, but we need the investment in the shared pathway systems, in terms of just waiting for people to switch. We know infrastructure is so critically important to actually support people. The footpaths currently are complex, as we know, and they're complex spaces, and we need actually that leadership around, you know, supporting a vision that we can all get behind and saying, hey, we need to start moving on-street parking to these shared spaces, and we can do that trials very quick, easily, low cost, with actually, you know, paints and barriers just to even start the trial to show what's possible. I think this is one of the issues that we keep hearing is, oh, we just got to wait for people to switch. We know that that's not right. You look at any of the behaviour research, it shows that people also need to have an confidence and investment, and having that infrastructure there to support that is really critical. We can go small, but this is something that we all can get behind and actually help. But we need to have some serious conversations. And I was hoping the forum would be about this, but it's more of a talk fest to us rather than actually allowing us to have these conversations where we can go, what is the solution going forward, and how do we actually put in investment across state, local, with industry and people, the community, to actually see some of this come about? Because so many of us want to see the active, you know, active transport and public transport and well-being. We know that. But I'm just hearing we've got to wait for people to switch to modes. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. We know that. We've got the research to prove it. So I'd love to see this.
I agree with Lisa there, definitely, James. Definitely agree.
So there was a motion to council recently to investigate footpath audits and things around the scooters, and another councillor asked to include investigation into that very aspect, so the increased access for cycles and bicycles and other things on the curb, on the road surface itself, and there are some very active groups within council and outside of council who are actively looking at and funding those investigations, and in some cases those installations.
Where that I live. Sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry, James.
You're fine. You go, Lisa.
No, I was just going to say, I also sit on the Active Living Coalition as well, and I know that there's multiple people that would be we're all talking the same thing. It's just we're not all in the same room to actually help this happen. I think that's one of the ongoing issues that we have, is that we keep a silo instead of bringing us together to actually help transform change. But look, I'm not going to take up any more time. I just know we're out of time. But yeah, thanks, James. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll just be very quick. So I guess the other thing about disability not being considered in the initial rollout of the trial is that people with disability also don't get to participate in using these devices. I mean, we've got people with walking impairments that need to access CBDs. How nice would it have been that some scooters could have been rolled out for them, and older Tasmanians that could use an accessible scooter as opposed to one where you've got to be completely physically able and extremely fantastic balance. I mean, again, not only are we impacted by the lack of foreplanning with these devices that increases our risk of injury, but also we can't participate in the trial.
So, I mean, there was consultation with those groups, and I admit that there are probably groups who felt they weren't consulted, and apologise for that. But we also have significant feedback from the elderly community and from people in the disabled community saying that the scooters, as they are, even without the more accessible models that are expected to come into the market fairly soon, that they are able to use the scooters to get around in a way that they couldn't using because of their disability previously. And I've got lots of feedback from members of the community saying that even with their disability, they are able to use the scooters and they really love using them for exactly the purpose that you're talking about.
I mean, if waiting for them to come to market, then why not delay the trial until everyone can participate?
Sorry, Michael.
Hi, thanks. Michael Small from Disability Voices Tasmania. Thanks for the presentation. It's been really interesting and informative to see the responses to the difficulties and the concerns that the disability and the age sector have had. I sort of reflect James's point. This is not the first trial. This has been happening all over the world. It's a shame that councils and the providers didn't ensure all of the initiatives that we are now seeing were actually put in place before the trial started. You've learned from your previous mistakes and problems. Why didn't we have them implemented straight up here? That's just a comment. Particularly want to thank Jen for her comments and support for the coalition that Disability Voices Tasmania has established between Paraquat, Disability Voices, Guide Dogs, BCA and COTA. We met with State Growth more than a month ago and received a commitment from State Growth that a roundtable would be established to actually canvass and discuss, create ideas, look at data, look at evaluation mechanisms, and all of those things. So we feel a commitment that this roundtable will be established. We think it should have been established before the trial started. Can I throw the question actually to Craig from State Growth? Is there any update on when the first meeting of the roundtable will be called? I think the answer was Craig from State Growth will get back to Robert with an update on that roundtable development, which we obviously think is critical.
Thank you, Mike.
My issues with the infrastructure that was brought up as well. I think the technology is ahead of the infrastructure, which is the problem, because while they can go on footpaths, these are not a necessity, they are a luxury, whereas someone in a wheelchair or other mobility devices, that is not something we get to choose. So the fact that our space is being taken up and we're verging on being collide with people, it's really worrying, and it makes us feel like we're not welcome within our own spaces.
Yeah, so the point was that e-scooters are a luxury rather than a right, and for people who are using other forms of transport for their own mobility through the city, such as a wheelchair, they're feeling like they're being squeezed off the footpaths by e-scooters and other uses of the footpath. And I would agree. I think in Tasmania, the Department of State Growth, I think, was extremely forward-thinking in making the legislation so that people could ride on the road or on the footpath, and that councils could allow e-scooters to ride on any road, even though any road with a 50 km/h limit or less. It's my hope that we would be able to introduce slowly the scooters from the footpath to the road, to get them off the footpath and onto the road. At the moment, one of the big issues of that is obviously that, for instance, in America, where e-scooters exist, where there have been e-scooter deaths, something between 60 and 80% are caused by the scooter being hit by a car. And so it's the issue of cars being on the road and cars moving through the city that is, potentially preventing us from moving scooters onto the road and moving scooters off the footpath. And so we've got, investigations into potentially using some of those road corridors as micromobility corridors to get those vehicles onto the road and maybe lowering the speed limit or even potentially removing cars. But obviously this is extraordinarily political. As soon as you say, I want to get a car off the parking spot or a car off a road, it's extremely difficult to push that through. I totally agree with you. Sorry, David, and then one more.
A couple of questions I've got for both. You may find one scooter on a footpath, right? But when you've got one of each of your brand, then they put the footpath. There's been a couple of those before, so you only know what each other's there, and it's like, oh, that's fine, that's not blocking anything. But when you get two different brands, they both end up blocking the footpath.
Can I just take that one? Because we've had a commitment before from the operators that if they are in a position to move their own scooter, and the opposition scooter is also there in a inconvenient spot, that they will move, that their staff will move the opposition scooter as well. So it's essentially.
I've seen that before, but here's a hygienic now. With the helmets, how people just putting them on and off all the time. What's done with hygiene with that?
So we use a disinfectant spray, and every time a marshal comes to touch that scooter,
those of us online can't hear any of
Quickly, the first question was what happens if two scooters from each thing from each company are blocking the same footpath? Is there any, what's needed to be done there? And my response was that the operators will move each other's scooters if they happen to be in place moving one of their own. And the second question was around the hygiene of people swapping helmets on and off as they use the scooters. And I think the response there is that people are welcome to bring their own helmet to start with, but secondly that the operators have this fairly high touch point where they're touching the scooters, between 1 and 2 times a day. They do disinfect them at the time. Even during COVID, there was no, as far as I'm aware, nowhere in the world was there an example of a scooter being a transmission vector for COVID, and the scooters kept running in a lot of cities throughout COVID, including in Hobart, and there was no COVID transmission through the scooters. That's about as transmissible as the disease gets.
I guess reports from health that with COVID could be passed on metallic surfaces like door handles, and the scooters obviously have metal components to them as well, that particularly if you need to move one out of your way, still a risk.
So a long-lasting disinfectant spray is used when they encounter the scooters, which has a period of efficacy of longer than a day, as I'm told, and they are encountering each scooter more than once a day, so that's reapplied, and so that tends to be the
But if I'm having to move one out of my way on a footpath before a marshal gets to it, and those of us that are in that position, then yeah, it's still a question mark.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
And I mean, types of injuries up here in the north, I've sustained a shoulder subluxation, which is a partial dislocation. I've had a hernia because when the scooter fell, as I fell, the handle went straight into my stomach. We've had a person with a prosthetic break, another person with an eye prosthetic shoot out and they've lost it, and also an assistance dog that has been decommissioned because of scooters falling on it, and now it's receiving renal treatment as a result of that. So we're not talking non-significant injuries, even if they haven't been dealt with by an emergency department.
Yeah, thank you. We have a question
I'll just pick up on one more. You brought up that stopping private vehicles from coming in. Some people with disability, that's their only form of transport, being able to take their cars in, because they can't get to bus stops.
Okay, so the question is whether stopping private vehicles would actually prevent people who require a private vehicle to get access into the city. They would be prevented because potentially lanes are blocked for scooters and all that sort of thing. And I think that's something that's extremely A, important, and B, part of the conversation is that in order to free up more space in the city, it's for those people who need to get into the city using whatever vehicle, whether it's a wheelchair or a disabled sticker car. So if we are able to encourage people to use other forms of transport, we take pressure off the parking system, and then we can open up those places for different uses, and that's including people who need to park because they're driving a car, because that's their only means of getting into the city.
Yeah, so my name is Laura. I have a disability. I have the privilege of being able to balance on one of these scooters. I just wanted to mention that people say this is a private scooter and the rules around them leaving them in the footpath is really expensive, and I'm only speaking for myself, but there's no way that I will leave it just anywhere because it's too expensive for me to replace. The question that I had earlier was, in Kingston, for instance, if we are required to move off the footpath, which is fine, what do we do if we only go from my house near Bunnings into Kingston on the Channel Highway and has no footpath and also has lane markings? Where should we ride to be able to stay out of the and would that be considered?
Okay, so the two questions there. One was a comment saying that it's unlikely that private scooter owners are going to leave their scooters on the footpath because it's an extremely expensive piece of equipment and they don't have the same protections around them as the higher scooters do, which is a good point. And the second question was if you're having to live in a place where, at the moment in Kingborough there aren't any scooters, but if there were scooters in Kingborough, there would be places where you're not allowed to ride on the road because it's got a lane marking on it, and you're not allowed to ride, or you can't ride on the footpath because there is no footpath. And I guess that's the kind of, I mean, in that case, if it was a 50 kilometre an hour road, Kingborough Council would have the ability to gazette that road, which would be, they would be allowed to publish on their website and in the government gazette that this road is now allowed to be used for micromobility vehicles or for PMDs. And once that has been gazetted by the road owner, which is usually the local council, then scooters can then use that road as they can all of the other roads that don't have line markings on them.
It's 60 kilometres an hour.
Yeah.
That road. I'll contact the council and let them respond.
Yeah, so in order for the scooters to ride on that road, it would have to be first reduced to 50 kilometres an hour, and second, have it gazetted by the local council. And the third option would be to install a footpath, but obviously there may not be room to do that. So I think we'll probably wrap up there. Thank you all very much. Oh, sorry, one more question, yes?
I want to ask a question about speed.
Yep.
I've been on the bike path, I've had your scooters overtaken. Why will that go 5 kilometres faster than me
Yeah, so the question was, why is it that scooters are allowed to go 5 kilometres an hour faster than someone who's in an electric wheelchair? Is that the only ones that are? So in an electric wheelchair, a motorised wheelchair is governed to 10 kilometres an hour, and a scooter has a speed limit of 15 kilometres an hour on the same path. And the question was why?
Past 25 kilometres on the bike track.
Right, and so 25 kilometres an hour on a bike track, whereas is a motorised wheelchair capable of going 25 kilometres an hour?
Some of them go quite fast.
Right, okay.
No, because they've been, that's it.
They've been speed limited.
They've been locked at that speed.
Yeah, so I'm not aware of the legislation around motorised wheelchairs. I personally don't see any reason why any scooter and a motorised wheelchair shouldn't be following the same speed limit, but it's not a local government question, it's a road rules question. So even for the footpaths, the legislation is state government wide, and it dictates what the maximum speed limit is on a footpath anywhere in Tasmania. So we can limit a scooter to 10 kilometres an hour using geofencing. We can't do it by legislation because we don't have legislative power over the road rules, but we can limit it by geofencing. That would be one of the higher scooters. We can't do anything to change any more than we can change the road rules, the speed limit for a highway or anything else.
I don't care about the private scooters. I'm just asking about this.
Yeah. So the maximum speed limit on a footpath is 15 kilometres an hour. It's possible by geofencing to reduce the speed limit in that zone to 10 kilometres an hour, but with current technology it's not possible to designate the footpath as 10 and the road as 25. So if you were to create a 10 kilometre an hour zone there, it would apply to the road and the footpath. So the only way that we can change to give a separate speed limit between the road and the footpath is A, by putting up signage saying 10 kilometres an hour, which we could do, and the second thing we could do is to geofence it if the technology was accurate enough, and that was some of the technological advances that were being talked about, things like the RTK, which is real-time kinematic positioning, which is a much more accurate way of knowing where a scooter is.
Our wheelchairs are already limited. There's a switch on my thing which puts me to half power.
Yeah.
We can put this mobility scooter past slower than 10 kilometres an hour.
Yeah, so I mean, it's possible to tell people to go 10 kilometres an hour, but I didn't know if you meant can we legally can we physically prevent people from going faster than 10 kilometres an hour? That's difficult. To tell people to only go 10 kilometres an hour, we can do that, but as a council we can only advise it. We can't change the legislation and change the road.
Can you put on a device that speed limits it to 10 kilometres an hour due to power outputs and physics?
So the scooters have
do it on motorised wheelchairs.
So
They can leave.
So the scooters already have a fast and a slow speed, exactly like you're talking about. I think the slow speed is set at 15. Is that right? The slow setting is set at 15 in a scooter. I mean, it's generally the case that people don't go 15 on a footpath because the maximum speed limit is 15, which I agree it should either be 15 for wheelchairs as well or 10 for both. I don't know what the policy setting is correct. But generally, the average speed that someone drives is less than the maximum speed you can drive. But yet, if you're in a slow zone, you're limited to 15 or whatever speed you want. And that's done by geofencing, so without the operator having to do anything, the scooter just slows down, and it's impossible to go faster. But the scooters also have...
That slow zone should always be 10 kilometres an hour.
Because the legislation allows e-scooters to go 25 kilometres an hour on the roads, and in order to encourage people to use it as a commuting tool, we would like them to be able... If it's 10 kilometres an hour, it's going to limit the number of people who find it advantageous to use a scooter, and they'll go back to using their car.
They found it advantageous, they can buy them.
Well, they can.
There's no scooter drop-off point where I live. Just a lot of people drop them off my way.
Right, so I mean, if there's a particular area where there's a problem with scooters being left, and that happens quite a lot, and that comes to our attention, we turn that into a no parking zone, or we do something about that zone to prevent that from happening. I'm very happy to do that if there's an area.
The point is, 1 kilometre away at Kmart, that's where the nearest scooter pickup point, where they purposely put scooters there to be picked up. All I have around here, road scooters, people travel to the northern border. I don't know how far past it that can go, right, on the highway. Your limits only say Great Road.
Well, it's the border of the LGA. It's the border of the Hobart LGA, wherever that crosses each road that runs between. Right. I mean, it's always possible for someone to keep dragging a scooter just as they could drag your wheelie bin 10 kilometres if they wanted to. So people do, particularly if it's down a hill, they might keep coasting. Say again.
It's 1 kilometre walk away from the highway to Kmart. That is the nearest level. The companies have set up their scooters about 6 each on the road, about 20 or so metres from the intersection of Main Road.
Right.
Outside Kmart. That's the nearest. So no one in my area is incentivised to take scooters unless owned.
We can certainly look at adding additional parking points in that area.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it works on a supply and demand. If there's a lot of demand for scooters, then the scooters will be more likely to be left there and also be more likely to be dropped there by the operators. At the moment, we've got a limited number of scooters that we can have throughout the entire LGA. So if you're at the very edge of the LGA, it's less likely you're going to find a scooter than in the middle of the LGA, but we can look at that area. I'm not sure if you're asking to see more parking zones in that area or not.
Questioning what you think is happening in that there is no incentive in my part of the council to take scooters.
Right. So I mean,
Why take my department office having its own car park?
yeah. So I mean, obviously there's going to be places where there are less incentives than other places. I mean, given that we're a couple of 4 months into the trial or something, we haven't yet established what those pathways are and what kind of appetite there is for people to use scooters as a tool for commuting into town. We would love people to do that, but in the end we don't have control over what people do. We're making that available to them, and if the demand is there, we'd be very happy to cater to that demand. And equally, if there are issues in places, as we have done all over the LGA, we're very happy to look at fixing those issues with some kind of no parking zone, slow zone, no riding zone. These have been put into place all over the place to fix these kinds of issues that crop up. They're things that you can't anticipate before the trial. You only know about them because this is what people tell us, like things like at the very edge of the LGA, people leaving a lot of scooters there because they can't go any further. And we've sort of done what we can to cut that back further so that there's more incentive for people to leave a scooter in a safe place rather than right on the border where it cuts out.
If local government can't do anything about the speed issues of legislation, who can we contact? Is that state government?
Yeah. So state growth has the state upper house and lower house voted on the legislation that came into effect on the 1st of December 2021, and that legislation, which I think has a sunset clause on the 17th of December 2022, so just like the trial, it's trial legislation, and the state government would then, if they were to renew that legislation, they may renew it with different speed limits, or they may renew it exactly as it is, or they may not renew it at all. So that'll be up to state government politicians to make a recommendation, or not, that'll be up to the Department of State Growth to make recommendations to the politicians to take advice from their constituents and whoever else they feel could take, and then to vote on that legislation. And if it gets through, again, it'll get through in whatever form has been decided by state politicians. And that's to set, I mean, as a local government, we can petition the state government to change the speed limits in town, which we've done. So it's gone from 50 to 40, and originally from 60 to 50, and then from 50 to 40 in some places in town. That's us requesting that change of the state government. If the state government agrees, they can then effect that change, and then we can. Can
you try and petition them for this as well then?
So we have the elected members in council about a month ago had a notice of motion, and within that notice of motion it said that council take the necessary action to reduce the speed limit from 15 kilometres an hour to 10 kilometres an hour on the footpath. Now the action that we could take would be to petition the state government. It could be to petition the operators to come up with technology that would allow us to do that. It could be for us to put up 10 kilometre an hour signs that actually aren't enforceable by legislation but would be probably obeyed by most people because people tend to follow speed zones. So we're now investigating which of those which or one or more of those is the most effective way to do it. Personally, I think that the most effective way to do it may be with the new technology that's coming in through the operators, because then we can, rather than being a blunt instrument of legislation and saying that all footpaths are now 10 kilometres an hour, we might be able to say, okay, these footpaths are fine at 15 kilometres an hour because they're wide and all for whatever reason, but these ones are better at 15 kilometres an hour. So that's where we do a footpath audit and we make a determination that all of these footpaths would be better off if there was no parking on them and the speed limit was 10 kilometres an hour, or you couldn't go on it at all.
But then if you're saying that some can go at 15 kilometres, that's still unfair for wheelchair users who can only go at 10.
But then wouldn't it be better to petition state government to allow you to go at 15 or 25?
Well, yeah, if that works, then wait, but as long as
So I'm not aware of what the legislative framework is around motorised wheelchairs. I only know about the one around PMDs. And I know how that works, but I don't know how the motorised wheelchair one works. But it would certainly, I mean, I don't know if that's the feeling in the wheelchair using community that they would prefer to be able to go faster or not. I don't know what the...
I think it would be a varied response.
Yeah, varied response. Yeah. So, but in any case, as far as I'm aware, that, as well as scooter speeds, would be a state government responsibility.
Here's a question for you all. Now, what restricts... Does the scooter seize up or something? So if someone took the scooter from here to Kingston and they went around the Channel Highway, what would happen? Would the scooter seize up or can they just keep going? Because we know one of you ended up with a scooter down to Ewanville.
That was in the back of the ute. Do you want to answer that?
When they go past the geofence? Yes. So once they go past the geofence, the slow acceleration speed, they'll slowly come to a stop and a halt, and a user will try to end their trip. If it's outside the geofence, they won't be able to end the trip, and a neuron e-scooter will speak to them and direct them back to go into the geofence where they can end the trip. So If it does end up much further out of the geofence, it most likely will be someone who hasn't ridden it. It's either being transported in some other.
So you think you can sell out of the north?
Only on the board. Yeah. So it'll generally, they'll come to a gradual halt, right? And then we'll be alerted that it's outside the geofence and we'll go pick it up and move it back in. It's in our best interest to move them back in. No one can start a trip with outside that geofence, and obviously we want to make sure that they're in the areas that we've agreed with.
I mean, with the helmets, isn't there some kind of technology you can put into it that the scooter won't go until the helmets? I still see people riding around with helmets, without the helmets, all the time, every day.
Yeah. I think we've been really trying to concentrate on the safety aspects that affect other users more so than the rider themselves, because in the end, if someone decides to ride their push bike without a helmet, it's really on them, and it doesn't hurt you any less if someone hits you on a scooter and they don't have a helmet on. But to that end, we're doing a state government has been running a campaign called Ride with Respect for the past 4 months, and as that tapers off, we're starting another one which is done by the council and the 2 operators, which is to encourage people particularly around safety aspects, like wearing your helmet, not doubling, not drink riding. I think the main reason for not having the helmets, having people forced to wear the helmet to make the scooter go, is that a lot of people choose to use their own helmet. And so if you come along with your own helmet, and then you've got a second helmet, and you've got to take it off the scooter to use it, you've got 2 helmets.
But it's still the situation, you're still getting people.
Yeah, I mean...
we don't want to be the police having to ring up near all the time saying we've seen this person do this, we've seen that person. We shouldn't have to be the police waving the stick at you guys all the time.
No, but I mean, at the same time, if I see someone jaywalking, I can ring the police or I can't.
Rob, let's not start getting technical about jaywalking.
No, but I'm just saying that we're very keen on things like children riding scooters, because A, we don't want children getting hurt, and B, children are much less likely to be able to control the scooter. Drink riding, because you're much more likely to run into someone else if you're riding drunk, and other things like that. If people choose to ride without a helmet, the police are able to book them and fine them, and the police will do that, but it's not necessarily, people ride their push bikes without helmets, and the police, take a view, do they book that person or not, and it's up to the police really in that case.
Yeah, but push bikes or some people aren't really going at 25 kilometres an hour around streets and things like that.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, but I mean, the average cycle, we're talking about people that cycle every day. The average cyclist rides occasionally, so it's not riding around at 25 kilometres.
Yeah. I guess in the end, there is an element of personal choice whether you wear a helmet or not, even though it's against the law. The law says you have to wear one, and the police can book you if you don't, but if you choose not to, it's really only up to you and the police whether anything happens about that. Although we do encourage it, the operators encourage it, we encourage it, and we're running a campaign to encourage it. It's not necessarily something that can be technologically solved. Just like you can't technologically stop a car going 110 in a 100 zone, you just rely on the person driving it not to do it.
Sorry, Robert, we do have to wind up.
Leave the room. Thank you very much. It's been an extremely interesting discussion. Very happy to continue it through the channels we've spoken about, or to run a similar session again, which would potentially be more discussion